Okay, it's been a few weeks since we've been together. I thought you might want to hear my voice. I certainly miss all of you guys. Really enjoyed reading all of your meditation entries. I felt I was trying to keep closer to you. So let's move on with our Confucian Society. We did have our lecture on the five constant relationships. Let's move forward and finish Confucianism today, and then we'll start Taoism later this week. So on the slide, you see Confucian Society if it's in front of you. At the center of the self, remember, Confucius' whole goal was to create a mandate of heaven, which is to try to create a harmonious society based on mutual goodness. Remember, Confucius says we're not born good, we have to be taught that goodness. And we do that by building virtue in our lives. So at the center of Confucian society is the self. So imagine this in a circular diagram with rings moving outward would be a better way to kind of view this Confucian society model. The self is the center of all human relationships, and for Confucius, it must undergo constant change for the better. So, by using role models, which we talked about earlier, we role model and we view people that we respect as our models to build virtue in our lives. And we talked about the types of virtue which lead to a chuan-tzu. The second level of Confucian's society is the family. Every family member has their role to play. Fathers, mothers, the eldest, the youngest, the middle children all have their roles and their duties to bring respect and honor to the family. Now, in our modern society, we might want to insert after the family level something like neighborhood or city and state. But for Confucius, the family jumped straight to the third level of Confucian society, which is the nation. He saw all the Chinese people as a Chinese family. And this greater sense of family was the whole push of his goal of socialism, was to bring the Chinese in their history from the past to a great nation as they had once been, and he wanted to recreate that for all the Chinese. So once we reach that nation level, then Confucius says the mandate of heaven is possible. And that's the goal of Confucian philosophy, is to create the best, most harmonious society that we possibly can based on moral goodness and respect of other people through the virtue that we build in our lives. Each person, as you see at the bottom of the slide, must do their part and realize their role in creating this society into becoming a successful whole. From Confucianism, we now start a new Chinese philosophy that we've yet to discuss, which is Taoism. Taoism is an interesting mystic understanding of philosophy. It's much more religious than the Confucian model of social harmony. Taoism goes back to the Bronze Age and is certainly contemplative of Confucius, but it's based on the legend of a man called Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is not a given name, it's actually a title meaning old master. And whether or not Lao Tzu actually was a historical person is in question. Many historians believe he may have been a conjured individual, and the reason the ancient Chinese may have conjured him is because the ancient Chinese belief of wisdom had to come from a master teacher. For example, the way of the Buddha came from the Buddha, and the way of Confucian thought came from Master Kung. So because of that, whether a group of people started this Taoist philosophy is quite possible. They felt that it belonged to a master, Lao Tzu. So again, historically, there is little proof of Lao Tzu's actual existence. Tradition states, though, that Lao Tzu was born around the year 600. You can see from the slide and read along with me. And after a short stay in politics, sounding suspiciously much like Confucius, he removed himself from society to live a life of solitude. He became a recluse and somewhat of a sage. In the forest, he meditated and began to keep to himself by looking for his own sense of enlightenment and inner peace. Reluctantly, and only reluctantly, did he become a teacher of others who were looking for his general knowledge. And Lao Tzu was an interesting character. He liked to teach through what we call paradoxes. And you'll read what paradoxes are about, and your later homework that I'm going to give you will have you read through some paradoxes. These are statements that sound illogical at first reading or understanding, but if you examine them and break them down, they actually hold great wisdom and great truth. We'll talk more about paradoxes later. So tradition claims that Lao Tzu wrote a very important text by his name, Lao Tzu, the original title, but today it's known as the Tao Te Ching, which is the equivalent of Taoist Bible. Most historians think that Chuan-Tzu, who is considered the second founder of Taoism, may actually be the true founder. Somewhere between 369 and 286 is the life of Chuan-Tzu, and he further expands the Taoist philosophy. He composes his own book named after himself, and he concentrates on what he calls the relativity of things. Do we really and are we able to give definite meaning to concept and theory? He thinks doubt not, probably not. So within Taoism, the nature of the Tao, which still means the path, navigates an individual through life, whereas Confucius thought the Tao was a moral conscience. For the Taoists, the Tao is not completely fully understood, but it's the way of nature. Nature is seen as the perfected way. So nature does not make moral judgments. Nature just moves consistently forward and is eternal if it's not interfered with. So for the Taoist philosophy, along with Lao Tzu and Chuan Tzu, the goal here is to become so in touch with nature or so blended in with nature that you are one with your current surroundings. So this is much different than what Confucius is trying to teach about social harmony or social order. Whereas Confucius thinks we are our brothers and sisters' keeper, Lao Tzu and Chuan Tzu would think that we are only responsible for our individual self, that we're responsible for making sure we have virtue and have connected that virtue to the oneness of nature around us. So our final understanding on the philosophy of the Tao are the concepts probably most famously connected to the Taoist philosophy. So the Taoists believe that there are two separate forces to the universe that bring harmony and bring balance. And those two forces are yin and yang. And you can see the qualities of each listed here on the Philosophy of the Tao slide. The yin is all things negative, passive, feminine, dark, weak, death, and so on. The yang side is the positive, active, masculine, seen as light, strength, and birth. But the two of them are necessary opposites. Don't connotate evil with yin, that would be a mistake. Don't necessarily connotate goodness with the yang, that would also be a mistake. They are two simple, necessary opposites that bring balance and order to the universe, or what the Chinese call Tai Chi, which is the balance or harmony that we're looking for. Living in accordance with the nature or the way of Tao, all humans are connected to this Tao. So Tao is like this life force that we've talked about before in our religion course, and to be connected to the Tao is the ideal of the Taoist philosophy. So meditation, again, is very key here in this philosophy, as is Tai Chi. Many of you were trying that body movements that I suggested that you try in our last 2 weeks, and some of you became very good at actually preferring Tai Chi to other forms of meditation. For those of you that understand that and connected to that, you're very Taoist in your nature. The goal of Taoism is to become what we call a sage, and this is a person who is living in perfect harmony with their natural reality of surrounding. You become one with your environment and blend in so seamlessly that you're undetectable. You have become one with nature. There are some real important characteristics that go along with being Taoist. And they're listed here on humility, non-competition, non-aggression, the passive rule, naturalness, and naturalism. But the most important quality of a Taoist is the practice of Wu Wei. And this is non-action, or more importantly, acting without intention. I don't want you to think it's the lack of action. To the contrary, it's just knowing when to act and what the proper action is. So when you act, we don't want to be an intention. We want to act because it's the right thing to do. The inner force of a human person, these Chinese philosophers call qi. Qi is like the energy that moves and flows throughout our body. And Taoist looks to reach and maintain that harmony through that inner qi, which is why Tai Chi tries to physically bring that balance or harmony between you when you're trying to go through those physical and spiritual motions of the fluidity. A lot of you noticed by practicing Tai Chi, you felt that there was a fluidity of movement in the Tai Chi you were trying to perform. That's exactly what you're supposed to do in connecting to this philosophy. There's another form of meditation that the Taoists prefer. It's called Zhuan, and Zhuan is to sit and forget. There are a number of you, when you were meditating the last 2 weeks, said that you sat and thought about nothing. And in that process, you found it quite peaceful to kind of empty your mind and not necessarily have any one thought be what you were concentrating on. Without knowing it, you were actually practicing the meditation a Taoist prefers, which is called Zhuan. The philosophy of martial arts, a lot of you know martial arts and have practiced martial arts, comes from this Taoist philosophy. The Shaolin priests of centuries past have dedicated themselves to understanding and the teaching of certain types of martial arts. All martial arts started in China. Finally, we talk about something which I can explain more when we're in person, This ideal of feng shui is creating harmony between humans and their environment and the environment immediately around you. So a feng shui expert would come into your home, for example, and rearrange the furniture in your home to make sure that the chi or the energy would flow through your home more harmoniously and actually make the house more productive and make the house a calmer, more peaceful place to be. So again, the Taoist ideal of this philosophy of Taoism is to create this inner sense of oneness with one's surrounding. And really, that is how virtue is built, is by doing what humanly comes natural when you are connected to the natural prospect or aspects of Tao.